All right, Abby's laying out the nuts and bolts there of what to expect, but Republicans are really hopeful. That's why we brought in Alfredo Rodriguez. He's the principal at Dice Communications in Dallas. He's also a longtime veteran of Republican politics in Texas and across the country as well. Alfredo, good to see you again, man.
Thanks for having me.
What are you having there, by the way? You
just a club soda this morning.
Yeah, that's this morning. You act like it's like 8 a.m. here, don't you?
Yeah, it's not
that early. It's 11:53 as we record this. Hey, we spoke a moment ago and said that President Trump thinks that Republicans can get 5 seats in Texas, can flip 5 seats. Is 5 seats realistic?
I think it's ambitious, but I think we can get 5 seats. I think Republicans can certainly get 5 seats. I think the obvious region of the state where we're looking to pick up is going to be in South Texas. And so if I'm, Congressman Gonzalez or if I'm Congressman Cuellar, I'd be really scared. Those seats are probably going to be drawn with some new areas to increase Republican majority populations, and they're going to have tough races ahead of them. But I also think that, Al Green, who's just south of Houston, there's very many pockets of the Houston suburbs that can be drawn into that district to make that Republican. And I would also be fearful if I was, Jasmine Crockett, simply because she continues to be a thorn in the side of President Trump. And we know that President Trump likes to, punch back, and she is continuing to, spew baseless liberal rhetoric and attacking the president. So I wouldn't be surprised if her South Dallas seat becomes more Republican by picking up some of the, other parts of the Metroplex.
I mean, you'd have to really branch out and go towards Kaufman County or deeper into Ellis County, I guess, into like Jake Elsie's district to get.
Sure.
To break up her district.
And that's the tricky thing about redistricting. I was involved with the last mid-decade redistricting. I was at the National Republican Congressional Committee. I was a regional political director, and Texas was one of my states. And that cycle, we ended up picking up, 5 seats in Texas as a result of the redistricting. We actually grew the majority that election in 2004. And it's tricky, and it's more tricky than your typical decennial redistricting, because it's, like you said, operating on older data. There are people that continue to move into the state, yesterday, the week before that, and the month before that, that we don't have information on.
That's what I meant by muddy. Yeah, it gets muddy, doesn't it?
It certainly does. But I think the trickiest part about mid-decade redistricting is it catches the current members of Congress off guard.
Yeah.
You have to have buy-in from the members of Congress and the Texas congressional delegation, and you have to have these members who have ruby red districts part ways with part of that ruby red portion of their district.
Yeah, but do you really need buy-in though if President Trump says let's do this?
Well, he certainly is the leader of the party, and people tend to follow his direction.
Sure.
And I think the overall goal here is to increase the majority. And I don't think even the current members in the Texas delegation are all that happy that all these votes that they have to take boil down to party line or picking up a few Democrats or a handful of Democrats to pass legislation to further the president's agenda.
Just to put a finer point on the muddy data here, though, because I think that's going to come into focus a lot during this, because as we said before, you've got computer help now. You're able to really get down very granularly and draw these districts exactly as you want them to be. But you're relying on that census data, and I thought Politico did a really good job on this. They were talking about the last time this was done, and that census data came out in 2021. It was a little bit late because it was COVID, and all of that. And they said it was already imperfect because it was during COVID, and it was hard to get out there and knock on doors and figure out who's living where and all of that. So you already had a little bit of issue with that back then, and those are the numbers they're still going to be working with and the data they're still working with. And it says that since then, it says also that Texas was one of the states with a big undercount that time around, as it turned out later on. So they figured out after the fact that, man, we missed a lot of people there. And then on top of that, they say that since then, the population here has grown by 2 million people, and you don't these districts don't account for that right now. So you're kind of taking some shots in the dark, and you're trying to also redistrict here for 2026, and there's going to be growth leading up to that. It seems very imperfect as a science compared to what we normally see with redistricting this time around.
Sure. Well, it is imperfect, but there are a lot of experts that are involved in the process. You not only will have the RNC, combing over, recent data from recent elections, even down to the municipal level. You'll have lawyers who are, making sure that, every box is checked and that everything is going to be compliant with any, lawsuits that may arise. And in Texas, lawsuits always arise with regards to redistricting. So there are a lot of experts involved.
There are mathematicians that are brought in.
There are mathematicians. There are statisticians. I mean, there are people that have done this previously. I'm sure that they're going to call up some of the veterans that were part of the process back in 2003.
Yeah, indeed so. Vicente Gonzalez, you mentioned, Henry Cuellar, Al Green out of Houston, Jasmine Crockett. How about Mark Vesey? I've heard his name bounced around because when his district was redrawn, it really now stretches all the way over into Dallas and into parts of northern Dallas. Is Vesey in trouble at all? I mean, Beth Van Dyne's district she had a plus 25, I think? You could easily draw some Republican voters into his district.
Right. Well, the smallest margin of victory for any of the Texas Republicans was 14%, and that was Maya Flores. And everyone else won, like you said, by many of them by 20 plus points in their districts.
So they can afford to give away some of those votes.
Well, they don't want
to a district
I'm sure,
next door.
But,
Right. As a political consultant, when I go out and look at congressional races, an R+5 district is typically considered a safe Republican district. We have districts here in Texas that are far exceed R+5, and so members are going to have to be comfortable with losing some of their Republican constituents and placing them in other districts so that we can achieve that five seat net gain.
But the thing you're trying to avoid here, if you're Republican, is what they call the dummy mander. When you're trying to gerrymander and you get it wrong, and they call it a dummy mander for obvious reasons. I saw one expert here in Texas who was quoted saying that Democrats are going to come out hot about this. They're going to criticize this. They're basically going to say that you're trying to stack the deck, you're trying to change the rules in the middle of the game because it's the only way you can hold on to power, that sort of thing. We've already been seeing some of that from Democrats. But he was saying, this expert was saying that they know, though, Democrats do, in the back of their minds, that in some cases, this is going to make the landscape more favorable for them in some districts because that district is not going to be so solidly safe Republican, and they might be able to compete in some places a little bit better than they would have been able to. Because you only have so much space and so many voters that you can carve up, so you've got to make some of these safe Republican districts a little bit more competitive for Democrats.
Well, I think this notion that Texas is moving closer to turning blue and that we may have a Democrat win statewide for the first time in 2 decades.
We've heard that for a long time.
We've heard that for a long time.
Yeah.
That's not the case. Texas is getting more conservative. It's getting more Republican. I don't see any scenario really that Texas loses the U.S. Senate seat in 2026. I see opportunity for us to pick up 3 to 5 seats here in Texas, and if it's done, smartly and accurately, I think we can achieve 5 seats.
But we've had people on this podcast who have said that, this is a red state, but more than that, it's a non-voting state. That so many people just don't show up, especially in the big cities that might tend to be more Democrat-leaning. Is there a risk here that you offend any voters, that you energize a voter who might not normally head to the polls if they hear Democrats enough saying that this is politicians choosing their voters, not the other way around? Do you run a risk there of waking people up who might have stayed home?
I don't think you run the risk of energizing people that haven't voted to go out and vote in large numbers. I don't think you run the risk of dissuading people from coming out to vote as a result of redistricting. What I would fear more than anything is that there are a lot of members in the Texas delegation who haven't run a tough race in a long, long time, who don't raise money as well as they should, who continue to rest on their laurels. Their constituent services are probably lacking because they have a safe Republican seat.
It's easy.
And have probably used consultants that continue to run the same cookie cutter campaign that got them elected the first time. And those members of Congress need to be more worried about that. Those things that they can change and they have control over, than some mass, uprising by voters to come out and vote them out.
Do you think that there are a lot of those who are kind of sleepy like that and just haven't been practicing and might not be ready for a tough game?
Well, I think you're going to see next fundraising quarter, after these lines are drawn, you're going to see robust fundraising totals from Republicans, and I think that they're going to wise up to the fact that, well, I've only been raising a couple $100,000, where I sit on the Energy and Commerce Committee, or I sit on the Ways and Means Committee. I sit on these A committees, and I ought to be raising $600,000, $700,000 each quarter, and I ought to be campaigning. There are many members of Congress that don't do direct mail, that don't do television advertising, digital advertising, because they know that their Republican seat is so safe. And those people need to be a little bit worried. But I do think that after the lines are drawn, that many of these members of Congress, if not all of them, are going to wise up, raise money, tend to their constituents as they should, and run real races and hire real consultants.
In the past, when districts have been redrawn here in the state, people sue as courts consider this. I think at least the last two times, courts have said, listen, for the next election, keep the current map, not the new map, keep the current one, and we'll figure this out. Is there a chance that could happen and this whole thing just doesn't get done in time for the 26th election for Republicans?
So that happened in Louisiana, and it's happened in other states as well. I don't think that we're going to fall. I don't think that Republicans are going to fall prey to that. I think
not?
that we will have new lines. Well, the courts have been very generous when it comes to congressional lines and congressional redraws in Texas. We seem to win those cases, despite the anger and fury and money pumped in behind lawsuits by Democrats.
But there's still one pending in El Paso, isn't it? The 21 redraw?
It is. It's still pending, and I think ultimately we win that.
Let me ask you this about that case. Does that case, in your estimation, get sort of reopened? Because that wrapped up in May. We still haven't gotten a decision in that case. But the interesting thing is in that case, the state Republicans argued repeatedly on the witness stand that this was a race-blind process. We drew these latest maps in 2021. We didn't consider race at all. Well, the predicate here for the governor asking for the lines to be redrawn again this year is that the Trump Justice Department said, hey, some of these districts look like they were drawn with, race in mind, and that's not constitutional, and we need to change that. So, basically the other side has gone back to that court now and said, hey, we need to consider this now, because the governor is kind of lining up with this idea that race was involved, and they said that race wasn't involved. Does that case get reopened? Does that complicate that case?
I think that case gets put on hold as a result of drawing new lines. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I don't think that a judge is going to go ahead and make a decision based on the fact that come Monday, we have a special session and redistricting is on the call, and they're going to want to see what do they do, or is this case now moot and doesn't deserve our attention anymore? Maybe we need to focus on what lawsuits may come as a result of the new lines.
Well, does that give those new lawsuits then any potency to say, hey, we're suing on these new maps that they drew, and we're using their own words that the current maps that were in place did not consider race, so these shouldn't have been redrawn. Does it give a more potent argument?
Well, I think the great fallacy when Democrats argue about the Voting Rights Act is they talk about, gerrymandering, and they talk about, separating, minority populations. Look at the facts. Latinos used to be a reliable voting bloc in Texas. They no longer are. They have been bleeding Latino votes across the state of Texas in high numbers. South Texas especially in this last election. So the Voting Rights Act also says don't consider race in drawing districts, but it doesn't say keep minorities in one district so that Democrats can win. That's not what the Voting Rights Act says. It says don't consider race and use race as the basis for drawing a district.
So President Trump is pushing this whole thing. I've talked to a number of Republicans in Congress of the Texas delegation. I'm sure you have as well. They're pretty skeptical of this thing here. What are you hearing from Republicans about this?
I think everyone probably initially had some skepticism, and I think when they sat down and heard the president speak and his enthusiasm for redrawing these lines, I think they kind of fell in line and were like, okay, this is, I want to be on the train. I don't want to be left behind, so I'm going to get behind this. And now I'm going to do my due diligence to make sure that my district is drawn so that I have a safe seat, even if it means that it's no longer, an R plus 18. Now it's an R plus 10.
Yeah, it's like self-preservation at that point.
Right.
You get in line. Take us inside a little bit. Why the skepticism from some originally, though?
Well, members of Congress don't like change. They have to go through redistricting every 10 years, so they don't want to have to go through it twice in 10 years. And so, like I said before, members of Congress and the Texas delegation who haven't raised money as they should have been raising money, haven't run campaigns as aggressively as they should have been running campaigns, probably initially were like, whoa, I don't want to change any of the calculus here, because I know that if I do nothing, if I just continue to do what I've been doing, I'm going to be reelected. Now there's going to be a new calculus, there's going to be new lines, there's going to be new voters that they need to speak to and talk to and communicate with through voter contact. And so now they need to, do what's necessary to maintain their seat and keep it in Republican hands.
Now, we've seen this before where you might end up, if you start, messing around with things and drawing, where you might end up putting red on red, a red against a red here. Is there a possibility that these districts kind of collide in a way that it's Republican versus Republican?
There's always that possibility. It's happened in other states. I believe it's happened in Texas as well. But I think that if the ultimate goal is to net 5 seats, I don't see how you can pit a sitting Republican member of Congress against another sitting Republican member of Congress and still achieve a five seat net gain.
You said 5 seats are ambitious. What's realistic?
I think 3 or 4. I think
think 4?
I do. I think 4. I think we could do 4, and I think the 4 that we mentioned. I think that Vicente Gonzalez and Henry Cuellar, probably should be measuring the drapes in some other office other than their congressional office.
That makes sense with all the Republican voters down there. I'm still confused about why Republicans think they could draw Jasmine out of her district. I mean, it can be done with gerrymandering. Of course, we've seen that everywhere.
Or just redrawing the lines, maybe not gerrymandering.
Well, gerrymandering. Come on, Alfredo. That's what it is here.
Again, the Metroplex is very, very large, and the population extends very far outside of downtown Dallas, where we're sitting. And so there are ways to bring in Republican votes to make Jasmine's district a lot less Democratic and more vulnerable. I think it's even easier in Al Green's seat. Al Green is a very compact seat right now. And if we were to simply draw his district that it included his home and a few neighborhoods around his home and picked up some Republican areas in the suburbs of Houston, that he would also be in jeopardy. And so I think those are 3 seats immediately that look likely to become Republican. And like I said, President Trump likes to punch back, and Jasmine Crockett is often punching up towards Trump and spewing liberal rhetoric.
Now, Democrats don't have a lot of power to fight this here in Texas. What do you anticipate from the minority party here? What will they do? How will they try to stop this? Will they try to stop this?
Well, they'll certainly try to stop this. I would go so far as to say that they have no power to stop this. This is going to happen. They may try to, shirk their responsibilities as elected officials and, skip town and maybe for a week or 2 weeks not have a quorum so that they can go ahead and vote on the new maps. But ultimately, they're going to have to come back and take a tough vote, and that tough vote is going to result in new districts for Republicans.
So the thing I've been curious about, if they break quorum like they did in 2003 and in 21 as well too, if they happen to carry it out through a couple of special sessions, which I think they did in 2003, what's the deadline on this getting done in order to notify voters of what their district's going to be? Does this have to be done December 1st or when? And if there's a hard deadline, couldn't the governor and the legislature just push the primary election back a month? That's
year? What I was going to say, and I hope that doesn't happen, but that has happened in other states. I've done a lot of work in North Carolina. North Carolina has moved its congressional primary elections from March to May to June, back to March to May, several times in their redistricting, mid-decade redistrictings. So that is an option. December 1 being the beginning of the filing deadline. Maybe they decide, okay, well, we're in our third special session. We're going to get it done in this special session, but we need to give some time, and so maybe we need to push the filing deadline back 30 days or back 45 days. And that means that the primary is not going to be the first Tuesday in March, maybe the first, Tuesday in May.
Well, getting to muddying things up, but that would just make it harder for campaigns, I guess, Republicans and Democrats, to make sure they get their voters to the polls when these elections actually happen.
Yes, but I do think that there is far greater enthusiasm amongst Republicans right now than there are Democrats, and certainly in the state of Texas.
So we have been watching, how this reverberates around the country because everybody's paying attention to this. We've got the governor out in California, Gavin Newsom, big Democrat, big opponent of Donald Trump. He's saying two can play at this game. Maybe here in California we need to have a look at doing the same thing, and essentially he's suggesting that maybe they redraw maps as well. It's a little trickier for them because theirs is done by a commission that's supposed to take the partisanship out of it. Is there a risk, though, that we start seeing escalation with other states trying to blunt what Texas has done, and then, if another state, a blue state does it, then another red state, tries to blunt what they just did? Is there a risk that we just see this escalation?
I think that Gavin Newsom's a lot of bark and not a whole lot of bite. I would be surprised if he goes through with trying to redistrict in the state of California. Like you said, it is much more difficult to do that. Here it's done by the legislature, and that's an easier avenue and path to go ahead and redistrict the lines in the state. So it would take a lot for Gavin Newsom, and I think that running for president in 28 is first and top of his mind, and I don't know that he wants to get embroiled in that type of fight and have punches thrown at him and get bruised up before that.
When we start thinking about these things, and I guess we'll be a little philosophical here, when we start talking about this state doing it and then that state wanting to do it to counter what that state did, and at the end of the day, each one of them is drawing districts that are reliable and totally safe, where there isn't much competition between parties anymore, on both sides. Is that good for democracy anymore? If people, if a huge number of people live in districts where it's decided in a primary by 5% of the voters essentially, and there's no real general election competition.
Well, elections have consequences, and the winner gets to decide the fate and the path of redistricting, and that's what we're doing here in Texas.
But is that good for democracy, though, if you see that in state after state, blue and red, where basically they choose and make it where it's one party dominance and it's not going to be broken?
Well, we've had that for a long time, and you see states like New York, and you see states like California. California used to be a state that continuously gained congressional seats. this next redistricting, it may be the first time that they lose congressional seats because people are mass exiting the state of California. We've already seen it in Illinois. We've seen it in New York, where they're losing congressional seats. So, these big states that used to have large congressional delegations are losing congressional members of Congress because they have to redistrict.
So you manage campaigns when you're not on the podcast with us here, and tell us what's happening behind the scenes for Republicans. If Jasmine Crockett, Vicente Gonzalez, Al Green, Henry Cuellar are in trouble, do you have Republican council people, legislators looking at these seats thinking that, well, if this gets redrawn and I'm in that district, then I might run for this? Is that happening right now?
Yeah, I do think that probably every member of the Texas legislature is keeping a close eye on this. One, because they're going to have to take a vote on it. But two, politics is all about opportunity, and redistricting presents a prime opportunity to seek another office. And so I think if you're, even a councilman or a mayor or a county commissioner or a county judge, you're probably keeping a close eye on this and looking at it. I would also add that, you have a lot of members of the Texas Senate who are running for comptroller and running for attorney general. They may reconsider what office they're running for once these lines are drawn and decide, I think I'm more popular than Congressman X. Why don't I challenge him?
I'm going to head to D.C.
Yeah.
Before we let you go, I have to ask you, because you were talking about how, Democrats for a long time, we've heard from them here in this state saying this is going to be the year that we're going to win a statewide race, and it hasn't happened in decades now. I saw a tweet from you the other day, though, trying to recruit someone into that Senate race to challenge John Cornyn, and you said Ken Paxton cannot win a general election here. Do you really believe that?
I don't believe that he cannot win a general election. I think it would be very difficult. He carries a lot of baggage. The Texas House of Representatives impeached him. He was lucky that he had friends in the Texas Senate that bailed him out. But I don't see, even though he's leading in the polls against John Cornyn, I don't see how, if he were to win that primary, that he would have that he would lose a general election.
Alfredo, come on. Donald Trump, same thing happened to him. He got reelected. He was impeached. He has 34 felonies. Voters don't care about that stuff.
Ken Paxton is not Donald Trump.
Ago. Well, true. No, you're exactly right about that. You're right about that. But you think that he couldn't? He might have trouble winning a general election? I mean, clearly Democrats think that.
I do. In fact, I think that Castro is probably taking a serious look at this. Mm-hmm. I think he is the most qualified and probably the best candidate that Democrats could recruit to run for the U.S. Senate. But they have a problem. They have two losers, not personal losers, but electoral losers who are likely to seek this seat in Beto O'Rourke and in Colin Allred. And they've proven that they can't win in this state, statewide in an election. And so
you think Democrats are looking for someone else right now?
I think that they should look for someone else, and I think that they probably would be open ears if someone else were to emerge that had a far better, ability to raise money and to connect with voters than either Colin Allred or Beto O'Rourke.
It's going to be an interesting midterm.
Yes.
Last question here from me. When all this kicks off on Monday with a special session, what should we be watching for?
Well, I don't know that redistricting is going to be the first thing of the call that's going to be considered. I think that probably the Central Texas floods and what do we do there will be considered. I think there's a lot that's already been done with regards to the property taxes and what we need to do in that area. And then obviously, the THC ban. That's something that, Governor Abbott, vetoed. And, so he's got some skin in the game to make sure that that the THC industry is regulated as opposed to banned in the state of Texas.
Yeah, I don't think the lieutenant governor is going to give up on that anytime soon either. That was a big priority for him this time around.
It was a big priority. I do think, as you mentioned before, I do not think that redistricting will be done in one special session.
You don't think
How
so?
many is it going to go, do you think?
I think it'll take two.
Two, okay.
I think it'll take two.
Wow.
I wouldn't be surprised if it only takes one. The president is pretty persuasive, and he really wants to make sure that he has a Republican majority in the House of Representatives.
Is this, though, a situation where D.C. is running things for Texas? I mean, this idea sort of originated there and came here. Usually Texas is so independent and, we're going to do things and we'll do things that originate here. And if lawmakers here wanted to do this, they would have done this in the regular session. Is this...
I don't think there's a big brother in the room. There's certainly collaboration, but absolutely, you have lawyers in D.C., you have lawyers in Texas, you have the RNC, you have the Texas GOP, you have the Texas legislature, you have the members of Congress that are currently serving. Everyone is going to weigh in with an opinion on how these lines ought to be drawn. I think the
Is everyone on the
greatest
same
influence.
page?
Right now, I doubt it, and I do think that the greatest influencer is Donald Trump, and this seems to be a high priority for him so that he can maintain a Republican majority in the House of Representatives.
Well, Alfredo Rodriguez, veteran of Republican politics, principal at Dice Communications in Dallas. Thanks for coming out, man. We appreciate your input as always. We'll be calling on you as this thing progresses.
Thank you for having me.
And a special shout out to our host, again, as always, Manhattan Project Brewing Company, for having us.